The battlefield had fallen into silence long before he arrived, but the air still carried the memory of violence. Smoke drifted across the broken ground, moving slowly like tired waves across a dark sea. Pieces of shattered ships lay scattered everywhere, some half buried in ash, others still glowing faintly from recent impact. The sky above was heavy with dark clouds, blocking most of the fading light, and the wind carried the faint metallic scent of burned engines and damaged armor. He walked carefully between the wreckage, placing each step with quiet purpose. His boots made soft sounds against the cracked surface, but otherwise he moved like a shadow among ruins. A small medical pack hung across his shoulder, worn from years of travel. Unlike most who came to battlefields, he carried no weapon, no blade, no rifle. Only tools meant to save rather than destroy.
He had seen too many wars already.
He no longer cared who started them or who claimed victory in the end. For him, the only thing that mattered was whether someone was still alive when he arrived. A faint sound reached his ears, not loud enough to be called a cry, but enough to catch his attention. He stopped immediately and turned toward the direction of the noise. For a few seconds, he listened carefully, allowing the wind to pass before focusing again. A small movement behind a collapsed transport shell. He moved slowly toward it, scanning the area for danger. Years of experience had taught him to remain cautious, but he never let fear stop him from helping someone in need. The transport shell was badly damaged, its outer hull torn open like paper. Beneath the twisted metal, he saw a figure lying partially hidden under debris. At first, he assumed it was another fallen soldier, but as he stepped closer, he realized something about the armor was different. It was elegant, not human. Dark material flowed smoothly across the body, decorated with faint patterns that almost seemed alive. Parts of the armor were broken, exposing pale skin beneath. Blood stained the ground around her. She was barely breathing. He dropped to his knees immediately and began working without hesitation. Carefully, he lifted the heavy pieces of metal away from her body, moving slowly to avoid causing more injury. His hands were steady, his breathing calm. Once she was free, he activated his scanner. Internal trauma, severe impact damage, fractured ribs, energy burns. She should not have been alive, but she was, and that was enough reason to try. He opened his medical kit and began cleaning her wounds. His movements were gentle but efficient, each action practiced from years of repetition. He injected stabilizing medicine into her arm and wrapped pressure bands around her torso to control bleeding. As he worked, he noticed faint glowing markings across her skin. They pulsed softly, like distant stars hidden beneath flesh. He paused briefly, curious, but quickly returned to his task. Species did not matter. Pain was universal. "You're going to be all right," he said quietly, more out of habit than expectation. He often spoke to patients even when they were unconscious. It reminded him that they were people, not just injuries to fix. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a colder temperature. He adjusted the thermal blanket around her shoulders, making sure she would not lose more heat. After several minutes, her breathing stabilized slightly. Relief softened his expression. He leaned back and allowed himself a short moment to rest, watching her carefully for any change. Then her eyes opened, silver, bright, and sharp, despite weakness. They focused on him instantly. He raised his hands, slightly to show he meant no harm. "You're safe," he said gently. She stared at him without speaking, her gaze intense and searching. There was something powerful behind her eyes, something ancient, heavy with experience. Even injured, she carried a quiet presence that felt larger than the battlefield around them. "Human," she whispered finally.
"Yes."
Her brows tightened slightly.
"Why help me?"
The question seemed genuine, almost confused. He gave a small shrug.
"You were hurt." She watched him silently, as if waiting for another explanation.
None came. He simply returned to checking her bandages, Her expression shifted slightly, confusion mixing with curiosity. She had known countless beings across the galaxy. Soldiers, rulers, traitors, allies. Most approached others with hidden motives. This human did not. He behaved as if kindness required no reward. She found that difficult to understand. A distant sound reached them, engines far above. She sensed them immediately. Her body tensed slightly. He noticed. "Friends?" he asked. She hesitated. He nodded once and did not ask more questions. Instead, he checked the horizon briefly before focusing on her again. "You shouldn't move yet." "Well, your body needs time." She studied him closely. No fear. No recognition. Only quiet concern. He did not know who she was. That realization created an unfamiliar feeling inside her chest, a strange kind of freedom. For the first time in many years, someone looked at her without expectations. The wind grew stronger, pulling at loose fabric and stirring dust into the air. He adjusted the blanket again and sat beside her, ready to wait as long as necessary. Minutes passed in silence. She watched him. He hummed softly without realizing. A simple human habit that felt oddly calming. Eventually, she spoke again. "You are not afraid." He considered the words for a moment.
I've learned fear doesn't help when someone is bleeding.
Her lips moved slightly, almost forming a smile. But she stopped herself. Far away, lights appeared in the sky, small at first, then slowly growing larger. Jeped. Many of them. He followed her gaze upward. "Looks like someone is searching," he said calmly.
Her eyes darkened.
They were searching, and when they arrived, they would expect her to stand as ruler, conqueror, empress. But here, beside this quiet human who treated her simply as a wounded stranger, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Peace. She closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself to rest. He remained beside her, unaware that he had just saved one of the most feared figures in the galaxy. Unaware that fleets had burned at her command. Unaware that the moment those ships arrived, his life would change forever. The lights in the sky grew larger with every passing second. At first they looked like distant stars moving slowly across the clouds, but soon their shapes became clear. Large ships descended through the dark sky, their engines glowing with controlled power. The air vibrated faintly as they slowed, hovering far above the ruined battlefield. He watched quietly, shielding his eyes slightly from the brightness. "They're coming closer," he said calmly. She did not respond immediately. Her silver eyes remained fixed on the sky, reflecting the approaching vessels. Beneath her calm expression, thoughts moved quickly. Timing, risk, loyalty, betrayal. All calculations formed instantly in her mind. For most beings, rescue would bring relief. For her, rescue meant danger. He glanced at her again. "You still shouldn't move," he reminded gently. She turned her head toward him, studying his face as if trying to understand something deeper than words. He showed no fear, no urgency to escape. Only quiet concern for her condition. "You stay," she said softly. He blinked slightly, confused by the statement.
"I was planning to," he replied, "until you're stable." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer before shifting back toward the sky.
The ships lowered further. Smaller craft detached from the main vessels, descending rapidly toward the ground. Their lights swept across the battlefield, scanning every piece of debris. He stood slowly, adjusting his medical pack. "Search teams," he murmured. The air pressure changed as one of the smaller ships landed nearby. Dust and ash lifted into the air, swirling around them. A ramp opened, and figures stepped out. They moved with precision. Tall, armored soldiers, their equipment advanced far beyond anything he had seen before. Their armor reflected faint light, decorated with sharp lines and glowing symbols. Weapons rested in their hands, ready but controlled. They stopped when they saw him. Several weapons lifted instantly. He raised both hands calmly. "I'm a medic," he said. One of the soldiers stepped forward, helmet turning toward the injured woman behind him. The moment the soldier recognized her, the entire group reacted at once. They lowered themselves to one knee. Silence filled the air. He frowned slightly, confused. The soldier closest to him spoke in a deep, respectful tone. "Your Majesty." He turned his head toward her slowly. She did not react. She simply watched the soldiers with calm authority, her presence changing completely. The quiet, injured stranger he had been helping now carried an undeniable weight. Even lying on the ground, she seemed larger than everyone around her. He felt surprise, but not fear.
Empress. The word formed in his mind naturally.
She was someone important. Very important. Yet he still saw the same wounded person he had treated moments ago. The soldiers approached carefully, but she raised one hand slightly. They stopped instantly. Her voice was soft but carried absolute command. "Stand down." The weapons lowered immediately. She turned her gaze toward the human medic. "This one helped me," she said. The soldiers looked at him again, this time with curiosity instead of suspicion. He felt slightly uncomfortable under their attention. "I just treated her injuries," he said simply. One of the soldiers bowed his head slightly. "You have done more than you understand."
He shrugged quietly.
She needed help. The soldiers exchanged brief looks, as if his answer confused them. A medical unit was brought forward quickly. Advanced scanning devices hovered around her, analyzing every injury. Bright lights moved across her body, displaying information and floating symbols he could not read. He stepped back slightly to give them space. She watched him as he moved away. "Stay," she said again. He paused. The soldiers froze, surprised by the command. He hesitated only for a second, before stepping closer again. If she wanted him nearby, he would remain. The advanced medical systems began working, but after a moment, she raised her hand again. "Enough!" The machine stopped instantly. The lead medic looked confused. "My Empress, your injuries require." "I am stabilized," she said calmly. "He has done sufficient work." The soldiers looked toward the human again, their respect growing. He felt slightly embarrassed by the attention. "I only followed basic treatment," he said quietly. She looked at him. "You acted without fear, without expectation."
He did not know how to answer that, so he remained silent.
The wind shifted again, carrying the distant sound of more ships arriving. The battlefield was no longer empty. Lights filled the sky and movement spread across the ruins as search teams secured the area. Despite the activity, she remained focused on him. "You did not ask who I was." He shook his head slightly. It didn't matter. Her expression softened, just slightly. Many had helped her in the past, but always with ambition or fear guiding them. This human had acted without either. It felt rare, unexpected, valuable. She slowly allowed the soldiers to assist her into a sitting position. Even injured, she carried herself with natural authority. Every movement was controlled, every gesture precise. The lead soldier spoke carefully. "The council feared the worst when your signal vanished." She did not respond immediately. Her gaze remained on the human. "What is your name?" she asked. He hesitated. Then he told her. She repeated it quietly, as if testing the sound. The moment felt strangely personal despite the surrounding soldiers. "Why were you here alone?" he asked gently. Some soldiers stiffened slightly at the question, but she allowed it. "I came to end a war," she said simply. That explained the battlefield. She studied his reaction carefully, perhaps expecting fear or awe. Instead, he only asked, "Did it work?" A faint expression crossed her face. Something close to amusement. "Yes." Silence followed. The soldiers prepared a transport for her, but before moving, she spoke again.
"You will come." He blinked in surprise.
"With you?"
"Yes." The soldiers exchanged glances again.
He hesitated. "I'm just a medic." She nodded slightly. "That is why." He considered for a moment. His work often took him from place to place, helping wherever he could. Leaving now would not change much, and she was still injured.
All right,
he said finally. A faint warmth appeared in her expression. As the transport lifted from the battlefield, he looked down at the ruined ground below, unaware that his life had just shifted into a path far beyond anything he imagined. Beside him sat the most feared empress in the galaxy, and she had chosen to keep him close. The transport ship moved smoothly through space, leaving the ruined battlefield far behind. Outside the wide viewing window, stars stretched endlessly across darkness, quiet and distant. Inside, soft lights filled the room with a calm glow, and the low hum of advanced engines created a steady rhythm. He stood near the window, watching silently. He had traveled through space before, but this ship felt different. Everything here was precise, elegant, and controlled. Even the air felt lighter. Behind him, soldiers moved carefully, maintaining distance from their empress while staying ready to respond at any moment. Their eyes often drifted toward the human medic, curiosity clear despite their disciplined posture. She sat in a raised chair designed for comfort and command at the same time. Medical devices hovered near her, monitoring her recovery. Her injuries were healing faster than he expected, though she still moved carefully. He approached slowly. "How do you feel?" he asked gently. Several soldiers stiffened slightly at his casual tone, but she lifted one hand subtly, stopping any reaction before it began. "Improving," she said. He checked the readings displayed on the floating screen beside her. He did not understand every symbol, but he recognized enough to know she was stabilizing.
you should still rest, he said.
"You speak to me as if I am not ruler of half the galaxy," he shrugged lightly. "You're still a patient." "Ooh." For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, small and quiet, but real. The soldiers exchanged surprised glances. No one spoke to her like that, ever. The ship changed direction slightly, and distant stars shifted outside the window. A large structure appeared ahead, growing larger as they approached. It was not a single ship, but an enormous floating city. Countless towers connected by glowing bridges, surrounded by smaller vessels, moving like silent birds.
"The capital," one soldier said quietly.
He watched in awe. It was beautiful. Lights moved across its surface like flowing rivers, and massive energy shields shimmered faintly around it. As they entered the docking area, dozens of ships aligned carefully, guided by invisible systems. The transport slowed, then landed with gentle precision. The ramp lowered. Outside waited a large group. Officials, guards, and beings from many different species stood in perfect formation. Some were tall and slender, others broad and armored. All bowed deeply the moment she appeared. He hesitated slightly before stepping out beside her. Every eye turned toward him instantly. Whispers moved through the crowd. A human, standing beside the Empress, he felt the weight of their attention, but remained calm. He had never cared much about status. To him, She was still the person whose wounds he had treated. She walked forward slowly but with unmistakable authority. Despite recent injuries, her presence filled the space like a quiet storm.
You may rise,
she said. The crowd stood. One tall figure stepped forward, an advisor, judging by the formal robes. My Empress, the Council feared your loss. I remain, she replied simply. The advisor's gaze shifted toward the human.
And this one? She answered without hesitation.
He saved my life. The word spread through the crowd like sudden wind. Surprise filled many faces.
Respectful looks replaced suspicion. He felt slightly uncomfortable again. I only did basic medical work, he said quietly. She turned her head toward him.
You acted when others would have hesitated. Her tone carried quiet certainty. He did not argue.
They moved through long halls filled with light and intricate designs. Walls displayed symbols and history he could not fully understand. Guards stood along the path, lowering their heads as she passed. He walked slightly behind her, unsure where he belonged in this place.
Eventually, they entered a large chamber overlooking the stars.
It felt more private, quieter than the rest of the palace. You will stay here, she said. He blinked. With you? Do you?
I don't know court rules or anything like that. You know how to heal, she replied calmly. That is enough.
Despite the luxury around him, he noticed she seemed more relaxed here, away from the crowds and expectations. She sat near the window, looking out into space. He watched her silently for a moment. You carry a lot, he said gently. Do you really? She turned slightly, surprised by the observation.
Everyone here treats you like a symbol, he continued.
But you're still just someone who got hurt. Her expression changed, something softer appearing beneath her strong exterior. You speak dangerously honestly, she said. He smiled faintly. Occupational habit. A quiet moment passed between them. Then an alarm sounded faintly through the room. A soldier entered quickly.
My Empress, council members request immediate audience. There are concerns regarding your human companion.
She looked toward the door, eyes sharpening.
They may wait.
The soldier bowed. Yes, my Empress.
He shifted slightly. I don't want to cause trouble.
You are not trouble, she said firmly. Her tone left no space for argument. Later, when the room grew quieter again, she spoke more softly.
Many fear what they do not understand.
He nodded. Humans get that a lot. She studied him carefully. You are calm despite being surrounded by beings far stronger than you. He considered her words. Strength isn't always about power, he said finally. Sometimes it's just about choosing to help instead of harm. She watched him in silence. Something about his perspective felt grounding. Outside, stars moved slowly across the window. For the first time since returning to the capital, she allowed herself to relax fully. And for the first time in years, she felt she could simply exist, not as a feared ruler, but as someone healing beside a person who saw her without titles. Neither of them knew yet how much that simple difference would change the future of the galaxy. The capital never truly slept. Outside the tall windows of her private chamber, ships moved like silent stars, traveling between towers and distant docking platforms. Soft light reflected across the glass, creating endless patterns that shifted slowly as the station rotated through space. He stood quietly near the window, watching the movement below. The past days had felt unreal. He had arrived here as a simple medic, and now found himself inside the center of galactic power. Behind him, she remained seated, calm but thoughtful. Her recovery had progressed quickly, though he still insisted on regular checks, much to the surprise of palace staff, who were not used to seeing their empress being gently ordered to rest. A soft chime sounded at the door.
A guard stepped inside and bowed deeply. "My empress, the council awaits."
"They request your presence immediately," as if preparing herself. "Very well." The guard hesitated slightly, then glanced toward the human.
"They request that the human not attend."
Silence filled the room. He turned slightly.
"It's fine," he said quietly. "I don't need to be involved."
But she stood slowly, her expression firm.
"He will come." The guard froze. "My empress, the council. He saved my life," she said calmly.
"He stands where I stand."
The guard bowed again, unable to argue further.
Moments later, they walked together through the long halls toward the council chamber. The atmosphere felt heavier than before. Guards stood closer together, and officials whispered quietly as they passed.
He sensed tension building.
The doors opened. Inside waited representatives from many species, seated in a circular arrangement.
Their eyes immediately focused on the human walking beside her. Some showed curiosity, others showed clear discomfort. She moved forward without hesitation and took her place at the center. He remained beside her, unsure where to stand, but she gestured slightly for him to stay close. One council member rose, tall, thin, with sharp features and glowing eyes. "My empress, we are relieved to see you alive. However, there are concerns." "Speak," she said. "The presence of a human within the inner court creates risk. Humans are unpredictable. Their history shows instability, rapid emotional response, and dangerous adaptability." He listened quietly, not reacting. Another council member leaned forward. "Reports suggest this human has gained your trust unusually quickly. Some fear manipulation." She remained calm.
"He treated me without knowing who I was,"
she said. "That is not manipulation." The council members exchanged looks. One spoke again. "Being so, allowing a human this level of proximity may send the wrong message to the galaxy." He stepped slightly back, not wanting to cause conflict, but she raised one hand. "He stays."
Her voice was soft but absolute.
Silence spread through the chamber. The first council member turned toward him. "Human," they said, "why do you remain here? What do you seek? Power? Influence?"
I'm just making sure she heals properly. Some council members seemed confused by the simplicity of the answer.
"You do not fear standing here among those who command fleets?"
He thought for a moment.
"I've seen enough pain to know titles don't stop injuries."
A quiet murmur moved through the chamber. She watched him closely, her silver eyes calm but warm. Another council member spoke.
"You treat our empress as an equal." "I treat her like a person," he replied.
The words hung in the air. For many present, such a statement would have sounded disrespectful, but instead of anger, she allowed a faint smile to appear. "He reminds me," she said softly, "that power is not the only form of strength." She stood slowly. "For generations, fear has ruled this empire. Enemies obey because they are afraid. Allies remain because they must. But this human acted without fear or expectation. That is a strength greater than any weapon."
"The galaxy changes. The galaxy changes."
"Perhaps it is time we change with it." The council members exchanged uncertain looks, but none challenged her directly. The meeting ended soon after. As they left the chamber, he released a quiet breath. That was intense. You spoke honestly. I always try to. They walked slowly through a quiet corridor. The tension from the council meeting faded gradually, replaced by calm silence. You changed things in there, he added. No, she said gently. You did. He laughed slightly. I'm just a medic. She stopped walking and turned toward him. You see yourself as small, she said. Yet you walked into danger without knowing who I was. You challenged a council without realizing it. You treat a ruler without fear. That is not small. He did not know how to answer. Outside the window beside them, stars stretched endlessly across darkness. I don't think humans are special, he said quietly. We just try to help each other when we can. She studied him for a long moment. That may be what makes humans special. Silence settled between them, comfortable and warm. For the first time since returning to the capital, she felt lighter, not because her injuries had healed, but because someone stood beside her without seeing her as a symbol or a weapon, just as herself. Days passed. Rumors spread across the capital about the human who stood beside the Empress, about how he spoke to her freely, about how she listened. Some feared change. Others felt hope. And slowly, without grand announcements or force, the tone of the Empire began to shift. Less fear, more understanding. One evening they stood together near the large viewing window again. Ships moved silently across the stars. You could leave, she said softly. If you want me to?
He shook his head. I stay where I'm needed. She turned toward him, eyes bright.
And where is that? He smiled slightly. Right now? Here! For someone feared across the galaxy, the answer felt strangely powerful. Outside, the stars continued their endless journey, and within the quiet halls of the capital, a new chapter began, not defined by conquest or fear, but by a simple act of kindness that changed everything.